back here on the Rich Eisen Show in his usual Wednesday spot is my friend from Fox Sports, our friend from The Athletic, Bruce Feldman. Good to see you, Bruce. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to be on with you, Rich.
Yeah, last week, when we were talking about the possibility of Bill Belichick taking a job in North Carolina, I had my tongue firmly planted in cheek saying, what is he going to get ready for Wake Forest next year? And at this point in time, this sounds serious. Like, is this going to happen, do you think, Bruce?
There's a very good chance it is, Rich. Our reporting at The Athletic yesterday was that he has been offered the job. The sides were not close on their terms. We've heard that it seems like they've gotten closer to making this happen. A couple things to keep in mind. So this has been a very unwieldy search by all our reporting. The Athletic has done a lot of digging into this, especially our Brendan Marks, who's covers North Carolina for us. And so what you have is normally the AD would be leading this and driving things in this direction. From what we gather, it seems like there's been one regent who has been driving it and connected to the Belichick side of this thing. And, there's different people who want different things. And this is not a place that has great resources in terms of financially right now on the NIL front towards revenue share. I mean, Mac Brown was making $5 million, which is a lot, but not a lot by big-time college football coach standards. I mean, that's less than half of what Dabo Swinney's getting. Mario Cristobal in the same conference makes a lot more. Most of the SEC makes a lot more. From our reporting, the offer initially to Belichick was in that ballpark. It's like, so he's half the coach of Dabo Swinney. It just didn't, I think a lot of that was going to be tough for Bill Belichick to probably swallow, but it's also going to be tough to say, hey, am I going to be able to compete for talent when all this is everybody's basically a free agent in college football? And so he can go, he talked on Pat McAfee a lot on Monday about just selling an NFL model. And some of the stuff he said, I think, really echoes the same kind of pitch Jed Fish had both at Arizona and Washington. Some of the same stuff that Kirby Smart and Bill Belichick have definitely emphasized and done well with. But if you don't have the financial backing when somebody goes, yeah, that's great, but how much can you pay me? I think that's the part where there's a disconnect.
Well, and then that's the disconnect I think a lot of fans and certainly NFL observers have about Belichick saying yes to something like this is the fact that there's the NIL aspect of it. And sure, we understand what the way of the world is, the NIL, and you could professionalize it and it's going to be like the NFL and things of that nature, except for the fact that there's a new league year. There's a new league year in the NFL, and there's a period by which you can't talk to anybody, and then you can, and then now it's a free-for-all, as opposed to the transfer portal happening when a player decides it's happening, and that's the way of the world that a lot of people think that Belichick wouldn't be fit for. Any reporting on this side of it from the North Carolina reporter that you're referring to, or anybody from your sources about how the fit works here, Bruce?
I think it's all TBD, and we've done a lot of reporting on this part. Like, Bill Belichick is not cold to college football in terms of his son Steve is the defensive coordinator at Washington. I know from being up there this year, Bill Belichick has been very involved in there. He's been in meetings. He's been around the team in team meetings. He's certainly been involved with the staff quite a bit, especially in spring football, in training camp as well. Now, I don't know if he's been there since they played. I heard he was there when they played Michigan. That was whatever it was, a month plus ago. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that. My understanding is he's not been around when it comes to any of the recruiting side of it. That's a different animal. The other thing is, you can talk about, and Belichick has talked about this some, certainly on McAfee, about understanding an NFL model and how it relates to now. This is closer to what college is. That, while there's some truth to that, you're not necessarily negotiating a lot with Drew Rosenhaus here and NFL accredited agents. Most of the people who are involved in this now, in terms of like the portal and who wants what, I mean, it doesn't, all you have is, all you need basically is a cell phone and an internet connection to be an agent on the NFL, on the NIL side of things. And those are the people who are really kind of driving a lot of stuff there. And so it's very unwieldy once he were to get into it, if it in fact does happen, of how this would play out in terms of like managing that. The calendar is way different for college coaches than it is in the NFL. I mean, the NFL, it's obviously a longer regular season and it's more intensive. It's not like there's a 20-hour rule with your players. But when it gets to the off season, it's way different and it's way longer. And I know a lot of coaches who used to coach in college who are in the NFL who are like have a much better quality of life because they have an off season. You really don't have that if you're a college football coach. Now people can say, yeah, well, you're making $5-10 million, and that's true, but it's just a different reality. And so, how he would actually take to it once he's doing it,
So
if he's doing it.
not to put any words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to hear what you're saying. So you're saying this is a search or a negotiation that's occurring without the athletic director's, I guess, not involvement, but usually leading the search, right, or the negotiation, and that at this point in time there's mutual interest, but the holdup might be money for the coach and also proof to the coach that there's enough money to compete on the front of name, image, and likeness to keep kids from hopping in the portal. Like, they're on a search for donor cash pretty much right now to make this happen, Bruce? Is that it?
I think there's a lot of other things they've had to kind of marshal together in the last 36 hours. From my understanding, this started to trend in the direction towards Bill Belichick and got momentum on Sunday, and has picked up speed. But again, they were pretty far off of the things he felt like he needed to take this job. And so, there's a lot, it's just more complicated. Like when Jim Harbaugh came back from the NFL, when he left the 49ers, now again, he had been a college coach. He was really successful at San Diego and then certainly at Stanford. This is just a different time in terms of like how you got revenue sharing coming up this summer. You have certainly NIL on the portal and how it's managed, but it's all the things that kind of come with that. And I think those are different parts of it. I mean, if you have people who are trying to approach it strictly from the NFL model, it's got to be some version of a modified thing. The other thing I would also, I thought about a bunch is about a year ago at this time, when Nick Saban, who's obviously, Belichick knows incredibly well, when he was making his decision to step down, I know one of the things that he told people close to him that he struggled with was the day before he made that announcement, he did all his exit interviews with his players, and we're talking about dozens of them. And the reaction and the kind of dialogue that he was getting from the players in terms of like their expectations, in terms of NIL and those things, and kind of how they were, I don't know if I would say how they were wired, but what was on their mind, was tough for him. It did not sit well with him. This is Nick Saban, who had a team that was probably as wired in for that and to be competitive as you're probably going to get in college football. And even that group, the answers he struggled with. So, is Bill Belichick ready for what he's going to get dealing with 17, 18, 19-year-olds in this day and age? And again, he's 72. Obviously he's the greatest football coach in the history of the NFL, but he is in his 70s. I mean, there was an interesting parallel to this. Bill Walsh, who had won 3 Super Bowls with the 49ers, came back to Stanford, 30 years ago. He had a really good first year, but he finished in 3 years. He went 17 and like 2 or whatever, how many ties they had. And he was in his early 60s, not in his early 70s. And so this would be an interesting experiment if North Carolina ends up in this situation.
And then last one for you on this: is there any truth that he would, if he does it, he would line up his son to be his successor?
That I've heard is not accurate.
Okay.
It wouldn't shock me if Steve Belichick ended up going with him.
Sure.
But to be the head coach and waiting down the road, I didn't. That we've heard is inaccurate in our reporting.
Okay. Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show. And before we get to the bracket, I mean, we just spoke at length about the world of college football and how how it's caused a lot of coaches to say, screw it, I'm going to the NFL, where there's actual rules about free agency, there's actual rules on paying people and things of that nature. And, in that respect, it's not lost on me. We spoke to Josh Heupel last week, Bruce, and he was talking about how they were dealing with the signing period right before conference championship weekend. He wasn't part of it, but he's dealing with the signing period. And then we just got off the phone, off the Zoom with Coach Lashley of SMU, and he had yet to look meaningfully at any Penn State film because he was dealing with portal stuff. And it's just, what sport is set up this way? It's insane, Bruce. And the question is when are, there's enough smart people to figure this thing out to not have these massively important periods occur around some of the most important games for these coaches and institutions that are already under significant pressure. Who the hell's in charge, and when are they going to actually address this thing, Bruce? What the hell?
First of all, nobody's in charge, and I don't know if there's enough smart people to figure it out because they know a lot of these factors and they still walk face first into it. So don't overestimate the intelligence of the people who are, quote unquote, running the sport. I mean, it's been a big money grab for a long time, and I feel like they're often at odds with maybe their own self-preservation, and that's just the reality of it. I mean, everybody saw this coming down the pipe, and they still, are face first into it. So you have players who are, starting quarterbacks. The starting quarterback at Duke led them to a 9-3 season. He's not finishing the season. He's in the portal. Now you have other, like Ohio State and SMU both have backup quarterbacks who are going in the portal, but they have said they are going to finish the season. But you also have coaches, who up and move before the year is over. And remember, these are the same people who will always they'll put up, mantras all over their locker room and all over their facility, finish, and everything about that and accountability. It's sometimes and often it's at odds with what their messaging is.
It's just crazy. There's no other sport where free agency takes place during the playoffs or just on the verge of the playoffs. It makes no sense. It's absurd, and it just adds pressures to a situation that doesn't require it. It's nuts. Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show. Your opinion of the bracket is what? What's your opinion of it?
I don't think Oregon got the best draw for being the only undefeated team. If you look at their half of it, as it is there, you got Tennessee. Tennessee's really talented. Ohio State is loaded. Clemson, Dabo's won 2 national, and then Texas came within a basically playing for the national title last year. Whereas on the other side, it's Georgia. And then the only other team I think has similar level of athletes, maybe not as much, is Penn State. Notre Dame's a good team, but just in terms of that, it feels like there's more of the powerhouse side on the Oregon piece of it. Now, I still think Oregon, they would be my pick to win it all. That's why I picked when I saw the bracket. They have the quarterback I would trust the most in a big game, and that's Dylan Gabriel. They have a lot of the same caliber, elite, big people that Georgia has, maybe not quite as many of them, but they have a really good scheme, and they're extremely well coached. I think Dan Lanning has just a really, really good feel for his players, and they never look tight, which is they look like they're always ready to play, which I wouldn't say the same for a lot of these other teams.
Well, I mean, we had Ward Manuel on Monday, the CFP selection committee chair and the AD at Michigan. He came on and he's like, and you probably know this already, but I'll just say it just to set up the rest of our conversation here, is that they just ranked them and then they popped them in order in the bracket. And the ranking came up the way it did based on factors that they all voted on without knowing where they would land. And then so be it that it's a tougher path for Oregon than it happened for Georgia because, Ohio State lost a non-conference game. Didn't lose a non-conference game. They lost a game to an unranked opponent. They put them there, and so it was them in Tennessee. And then Texas fell with Clemson as well, right there on that side of the bracket for Oregon. And, Ohio State fans are pissed because it seems like Penn State is an easier path than Ohio State, and Penn State lost to Ohio State. That's just basically the way it is because they're mandated to put teams in the byes where based on the fact that they won conference championships, so on and so forth. That's what he said. So
yeah, and I think that's the part that may get undone on the next contract is the shoehorning teams from perceived lesser conferences that are getting shoehorned up into slots where they're not in the rankings. In this case, it was certainly Boise State. And when you had that with Arizona State as well, Arizona State, both teams are great stories, especially Arizona State. They were preseason picked to finish last in the Big 12, and now they're getting a first-round bye in the playoff. And they're a hot team, like the way they play down the stretch. But I think that piece of it I wouldn't expect to see this again because it definitely muddied up how the bracket unfolded in terms of that. Now, look, it may work in the best interest of the SEC and Georgia. We'll see. Carson Beck's questionable, because of his elbow injury. We'll see if he's actually going to be able to play. I can't wait to see how this tournament plays out. I think it's hard to look and go, okay, would Indiana be the upset pick I would pick to knock off Notre Dame in the first round? I would hope to see that there'll be some kind of upset, in this bracket or a big upset. I don't know that we're going to see it just because college football is very different from college basketball, where you get like somebody gets cold, somebody gets hot, and that changes it. But, we're in the infancy stages of a 12-team playoff. And because of that, you're getting this, you can't please everybody. I get it. They wanted to have these first-round byes for conference champs, and it's, they're going to learn from it, I think, and they're going to probably reevaluate it as soon as they can.
Well, just to finish it up, I think the biggest upset would be any of the teams that don't get a bye winning it all. That would be the upset because just, again, for Ohio State or Tennessee, just using that as an example right there, for them to beat the other and then have to go beat Oregon and then go beat whoever comes out of the other part of the bracket and then arguably Georgia – name me any team in college football that would have a 4-game stretch during their regular season of scheduling to have that tough a stretch. Like it doesn't exist because of the lesser opponents they face within their conference or the non-conference people they purposefully set up to prop up their record. Like you
don't lose. Well, don't lose 2 games in your and come out without winning your conference title. They don't have. They could blame that. Don't lose to Michigan if you're don't lose to a basically a 500 team at home. That's that. If you're like Lane Kiffin did a lot of complaining about, but they lost at home to Kentucky. Kentucky didn't beat any other team in the SEC. It's one thing to have one of those. If you have that couple with other losses, it's hard to feel too bad about Alabama. They got blown out on the road by 3 touchdowns against a really mediocre Oklahoma team on top of losing to Vanderbilt and on top of another loss. So, again, I think it's harder to feel too bad for the teams that, have multiple losses and didn't even, make it to their conference championship game.
Before I let you go, your best guess on when we'll find out yay or nay on Belichick is when? What do you think?
Hopefully within the next 24 hours.
Really? So it won't even this won't be in doubt for Heisman Trophy weekend. You think it'll be done?
I would imagine if they're still kind of noodling around on the contract numbers by that long down the stretch, I would think that's a really bad sign. I would think it would have to be within the next 24 hours. For us to report yesterday at The Athletic that it was already been offered and they're still talking about it, usually those things don't take like a month to get sorted out.
Bruce, thanks for the time. Greatly appreciate it. Be well. We'll chat with you.
Thanks Sounds again. Good. Thanks, Rich.
You got it. Everybody check out Bruce Feldman on The Athletic and Fox Sports right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.